I had the pleasure of chairing our Aspire to Lead Planning Committee this year. And as we thought about what we wanted the day to be about, the idea of confidence kept coming up. We know that women start their careers much lower on the confidence index than men do. We start at about 30% confidence. Men start at about 50% confident. And it takes us until our 40s to catch up. So what I'm hoping is that today we'll all leave with a renewed sense of confidence in our own skills, but also a sense that we can encourage everybody else around us to take those risks, to step forward confidently. So I mentioned we're going to do a practice poll. Let's see how we're feeling today. If you go into convene and you go into the welcome session, you should see a little graph icon. That's where you'll get to the polls. If you're using an iPhone, I think it's at the top. This is a screenshot from an Android. Click on that, and it will take you to this poll. How are you feeling this morning? Are you totally confident? You could get up on stage and take my place. You'd be great. Are you feeling mostly confident? Somewhat? Or maybe you came today not feeling super confident. Let's see how we're doing as a group. All right. I like it. I love that we're mostly in that mostly confident. I don't see anybody who's not feeling very confident today, so that's great. My hope is that today we will increase those numbers all the way up to the top. Every time I say, let's talk about how can we increase women's confidence, somebody says to me, Christi, I am never going to get up on stage in front of 650 people. That's just not me. I don't want to be that confident person. I want to challenge our definition of confidence. There's a researcher at the University of Ohio State whose name is Richard Petty, and he defines confidence this way. It's the stuff that turns your ideas into action. It's not the stuff that makes you feel less scared. It's not the stuff that helps you develop a maybe overinflated ego. It's just the stuff that turns your ideas into action. And I love that definition because I think it opens us up to this idea of more authentic confidence. I'm going to start with a story. Some of the people in the room may have been in the room when this happened, so just don't tell. I started my career at Thomson Reuters as an intern. And as an intern, we had a chance to meet with lots of senior level executives. So one of these meetings, we were in kind of a conference room, and one of our C-level Thomson Reuters executives was presenting. And he talked for a while, and he said, does anybody have any questions? So I raised my hand. I asked my question, and we went on. And he talked for a while again. And then at the end, he said, does anybody have any more questions? I kind of looked around, kind of sat on my hands, waited for somebody else, and nobody asked a question. So my hand goes up. And he looks at me and he says, okay, Miss Confidence, what's your question? I don't remember what I asked. I have no idea what he said. But I absolutely remember him looking at me and saying, okay, Miss Confidence, what's your question? That was the first time that I had thought about confidence as part of my identity, as part of what I bring to work, as part of what I bring to my life. But it was also the first time that I encountered the idea that confidence in women is not always positively accepted. See, my peers saw that title, Miss Confidence, as confirmation that I was maybe a little too big for my britches. They probably were right. So that's why authentic confidence is so important. Deb Walton, a different Thomson Reuters executive, defines authenticity as being yourself with skill and in context. I probably was missing a little bit of that with skill and in context part. But I think when we put these things together, this idea that confidence is simply the stuff that turns your ideas into action, and that you can do that authentically when you do it in the right context and with skill. Every single person in this room has the ability to step forward, to take those risks, to be authentically confident. I've been doing a lot of research on the idea of confidence, and there are some fascinating studies happening. There's a researcher in Milan whose name is Zachary Estes, and he did this study where he gave 500 men and women the same test. It was one of those horrible tests where you take a 3D figure and you have to manipulate it and say what it would look like. I'm terrible at them. But he had the theory that men and women would be equally competent at this type of test. So he gives this test to 500 people. And the first time he gives it, men score statistically significantly higher than women. So he's surprised by this because it doesn't match his hypothesis. And like any good researcher, he looks at his data. And what he finds is that women skipped questions. If they weren't 100% confident that they'd be right, they didn't answer. So he gives this test again to a new group of 500 men and women. And this time he adds an instruction. He says you have to answer every question. You have to try. What do you think happens the second time? Men and women score exactly the same. You're right. So this shows us that sometimes we just need someone to say, you have to take that risk. You have to try. Zacharias just did another study that I think is really interesting. This time, it's a one-question test. And the first time he gives it, again, men and women, 80% of men, 80% of women get it right. So he thinks that matches my hypothesis that men and women have equal levels of performance. But he gives the test again. And again, he adds an instruction. Answer the question, and then tell me how confident you are in your answer. Remember, the first time he gives this test, no second instruction. Men score 80% of the time, women get it right 80% of the time. The second time, when he asks the same question, and he says, tell me how confident you are in your answer, men answer it correctly 95% of the time. So for men, asking them to think about how confident they are actually improves their performance. But for women only 75% of the time answer it correctly if he adds that second question, how confident are you? And so what this shows us is that sometimes we just get in our own way. When we let that voice in the back of our head that says, somebody would be better at this. Are you sure you want to do that? That seems kind of risky. When we let that voice get too loud, we actually negatively impact our performance. So when we put these two things together, this idea that if we step forward and we take those risks, we perform just as well as men. And this idea that if we just get out of our own head and we quit listening to that voice that says, maybe you shouldn't do this, then we perform just as well as men. And if we start to do that, we will start to see more and more women attaining those senior leadership levels that we know we would love to have more parity at. I have one more story. When I was a senior in college, I was going to interview for my first big kid job, right? And it was probably at Thomson Reuters, and I was so nervous. I had my portfolio ready, I had all my writing samples, I knew what I thought the person was gonna ask me, but I was shaking. And a friend of mine came to me and he said, what is wrong with you? You are a confident, intelligent woman. Go act like it. And at that moment, I realized he was right. I was absolutely in my head about this. Nothing I was going to do differently was going to change the outcome of this interview, except that I was so nervous, I was petrified. And that was going to make me perform poorly. And so now, anytime I go into a situation that's a little scary, say speaking in front of 650 people, I hear in my head that friend's voice saying, you are a confident, intelligent woman. Go act like it. So my hope for today is that all of us will find that renewed sense of confidence. All of us will know that we can step forward and lead authentically, because every single person in this room is a confident, intelligent, amazing person, and we have the ability to act like it. I have one more study to share with you. KPMG did a really interesting study with women who are early in their careers. They looked at people between the ages of 18 and 35, and they asked them, do you want to hold a senior leadership role? 64% of those women said, yes, I aspire to a senior leadership role. But fewer than half of them could picture themselves in it. Now, that same study had a glimmer of hope. What it also revealed is that 84% of the women said, when I see another woman doing amazing things, holding those senior leadership roles and rocking it, I think I can do it too. That's what makes today so important. We have so many amazing women who are going to share their stories to inspire us, to help us know that we absolutely can do it as well.